Okay, folks. Hey there, it's Michael and
Melanie in
from
Minnesota.
cold Minnesota.
Snowy and cold.
Snowy
Yeah.
cold. And Michael in the nice, warm, cool,
Rub it in.
not too cold Texas, South Texas. Yes. So, with the Reason RX podcast, we are back today. Back in black. We all have black on? Whoa, yeah, we're back in black. Dang. We're all in black. Sweet. Back in black with the great, the one and only, the inimitable Dr. Andrew Bernstein.
All right.
Hey, well, thanks, guys. It's always the epitome of coolness. Even if it's 80 degrees in Houston in December, it's always the epitome of coolness to be on the Mel and Mike show. So thanks for having me back.
Thanks for being here. Great. Yeah.
Absolutely, positively, most defiantly. I am happy to do it.
Most of
Truth. Yeah. So
we're going to discuss something about education, I assume, right? With Mel and Mike.
Yeah. So last time, folks, if you remember, you can tune in to a previous episode. Forget which number it was. We're on 39 now. Nice number, 39. A multiple of two prime numbers, 3 and 13.
He's the math guy.
But last time we talked with the great Andy about what's wrong with American education today, the good, the bad, and the ugly of education. What's really going on with it. There's some good things, of course, but some things that are not so good, to put it like politely and kind of
and mildly.
Yeah. But I guess we ought to be honest and be real. Some stuff, is bad, is evil, it is irrational, illogical. It should not be. You got to identify the negative for the negative. If you're going to focus on the positive and develop that, we can't pretend the positive and the negative are the same. Everything's equal. What helps our kids is not just whatever someone wants to do or whatever. There's certain things that help and certain things that don't, and we need to focus on those. So, since we talked about like some of the problems last time, this time we want to see what American education, or what education is, I should say, education in general, why we need an education, and we'll talk about that some, and then get into what logic is, its role in education, its role in human life. I think because a lot of people, I think, misunderstand what the nature of logic is. So that's an important topic we need to discuss sometime or other in this. And, I didn't say it in particular, but Melanie's back this time. Yay! She wasn't here last time or two.
Always good to have Melanie. She beautifies the environment amongst other things. But yeah, I've taught logic for like over 30 years, guys. So
sweet.
So it's certainly a topic that I'm comfortable talking about.
Great. Yeah.
And
lots of questions.
Folks can look at, like last time we talked about his bio. If someone wants to know about Andy, you can look in the show notes or look at the episode last time he was here. But
just go on my website, andrewbernstein.net.
Sure. Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. But I like that Andy's got this fancy camera. He's like sitting still, but he's got this camera, so it's like this video's behind him, so it looks like everything's moving behind him. It is so cool.
Right.
Not really. Andy's what are you doing today, Andy?
I'm being an Aristotelian. I'm a peripatetic. I like to walk around the gardens when I talk or lecture or teach or stuff like that. So that's what I'm doing.
So, but not the garden. You got plants around there?
Yeah, the New York suburbs. Yeah, it's pretty green. It's pretty green up here, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
And so, what exactly does peripatetic mean for folks?
Oh, I don't even know what the literal translation is. It's a term they applied to Aristotle because when he taught his students at his school, the Lyceum, he liked to walk in the gardens, and the students followed him, and taking notes. So that's all peripatetic means. It just means you walk around when you teach.
Okay, I asked Dr. Google. Dr. Google told me that peripatetic is an adjective meaning traveling from place to place, in particular working or based in various places for relatively short periods. Number 2, Aristotelian. The peripatetic school was a school of philosophy in ancient Greece. Its teachings derived from its founder Aristotle, and peripatetic is an adjective ascribed to his followers. So, there. Thank you, Dr.
Right.
Google.
But you wanted to discuss, if I remember, about why education is even necessary for human beings. I think you wanted to discuss real philosophical question like that.
Something a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think do you think it's an important question for people to address, at least to some extent, if they're going to get education right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, speaking of Aristotle, this goes right to the heart of his philosophy and Ayn Rand as a 20th century Aristotelian, and that is, man is the rational animal, and Ayn Rand that the rational faculty, our ability to think, is what fundamentally distinguishes us from the other animals, from lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! And Ayn Rand carried that to the next level. That's not just our fundamental distinguishing characteristic, but it's our survival instrument. It's what enables us to flourish on this earth in two ways. We need reason to deal with nature. I mean, this is how we learn how to grow crops and cure diseases and build homes and all good things like that. And then to deal with society. This is to rationally negotiate our disagreements so that they don't evolve into screaming irrationality or, much worse, the initiation of brute physical violence. So we need our rational faculty to deal effectively with both nature and with society. And the rational faculty is a complex phenomena that needs a lot of nurturing, a lot of cultivation. I mean, as Ayn Rand points out, nature endows every species with certain characteristics by means of which, to seek survival. Like birds have their wings to fly, and lions have their claws and fangs to tear apart their prey and such. And notice with these other species, they need some rudimentary education. Mother birds teach their fledglings how to fly, and mother lions or cats of any kind teach their kittens or their cubs how to hunt. It's similar for human beings. It's just that our faculty is so much more sophisticated. It needs so much more cultivation. It needs an education. We need to learn how to think. We need what they used to call, at the very least, what they used to call the 3 R's. Reading, writing, arithmetic as the basic teaching methods. As the foundation of cognition. We everybody, by our natures, like birds need to fly in order to survive, human beings need to think, and thinking needs to be cultivated. It's a skill, and it's a very sophisticated, very advanced skill that needs a great deal of work. I mean, Michael, you're a math teacher. How much work it takes to master all the nuances of arithmetic and then move on to higher mathematics, to algebra, geometry, trig, pre-calc. It takes years. Mm-hmm. And similarly with the development of writing, my college students, sadly, I teach. I have a lot of good kids. They're really good kids. They're good American kids. I love them. I'd adopt some of them, but the schools have failed them. Their reading and writing skills are very weak, to put it mildly. And these are basic cognitive skills that all human beings need. And this is the kind of reason that we all need an education. It's the mind is our survival instrument, and it needs to be nurtured.
And one thing really quickly, I like the way I think Forster and Stedman, in a book about writing and thinking, they actually call it, say it's like writing is just an expression of thought. And it's not like, oh, well, I can't write very well, but I'm okay, because writing just is your ability to write. Okay, it's a skill on its own, but a lot of it is just a reflection of your ability to think. So
writing is thinking on paper.
Yeah.
Well, what used to be paper, now it's thinking on the computer screen.
Thinking on electrons, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, do you think that that there may be some accuracy, like there's a skill in writing that they may have the thoughts, but they don't make the connection on paper, to get it there? Is that true, or is it you should be able to write? If you can think straight and clearly, you should be able to write.
Well, I think there's a direct connection between thinking clearly and writing clearly. So I think if if somebody really understands the subject, they should be able to write it coherently. And here's an important thing that I know you guys spoke about logic, and I think that'll segue us into it, and that is grammar. The basic mechanics of grammar, because a lot of people think grammar is fundamentally for communication, but it's secondarily for communication. It's fundamentally for thinking. To be able to think clearly in terms of objects and their properties and their actions, to put together coherent thoughts, whether it's verbally or in our own mind or verbally or literarily. It's all one. So the tragedy today, and I think, Melanie, the reason why so many of these poor kids can't write is the schools just don't teach much grammar anymore. I remember saying to students in my logic class just a few weeks ago, I said, this is 4th grade grammar, guys. And they just looked at me, and it occurred to me. And I said, do they teach grammar in the 4th grade anymore? And they just looked at me blankly. Some of these kids, it's a Catholic school. Some of these kids went to Catholic schools, not all the public schools. And I said, do they teach grammar at all? And one of the boys in class said, well, I studied grammar in the 8th grade. And I said, well, better late than never. So, no, they don't teach much grammar anymore. So it's not a mystery why these kids struggle horribly to write.
I see that with working with people on the SAT. It's very prevalent, no matter where these kids go to school, what their level of so-called excuse me, educational attainment is according to the modern system. But unfortunately, sadly, a lot of them cannot pick out the subject and verb of a sentence. So they kind of sort of get it. Yeah, it's like there's these words being said and stuff going on. But, okay, what is actually being discussed and what is it doing? What's a subject and verb? It's rare that I get anybody that can do that. It's unfortunate. And
I understand. I see it in the college students all the time. We inherit the failures of the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And the college kids very often need remedial work in reading and writing, and they're just not ready for philosophy classes. And my colleagues in math and science tell me it's the same there. The kids need remedial work. But anyway, the good news is it's not that hard. Parents can do a lot of this, and you see a lot of success amongst homeschoolers. Just to teach the 3 R's, the basic basic thinking skills of reading, writing, arithmetic. It's not that hard, and I think that.
And then it helped the parents. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, it's like the parents, when they're teaching their kids, they can learn it at the same time. So you can remediate your own education and do something that is very valuable for your life. You can communicate better with your spouse, with people at work, with your kids, because the grammar helps you think better, which in turn helps you communicate better.
Absolutely.
But somewhere along the line, someone said it's not important. We can let that go, because that's why parents don't know it if they're needing help learning it with their kids. Somewhere, that's why schools aren't promoting it or pushing it or having classes in it, right? Somewhere, somebody got the idea that that's just superfluous. We don't need to keep it around anymore. Right.
And if I remember correctly, Mel, we discussed this last time I was on your illustrious show. We could certainly reprise it here if you want. And my book that I'm working on, Why Johnny, picking up on Rudolph Flesch's great work, Why Johnny Can't Read. My book is Why Johnny Still Can't Read or write, think, or understand math and what we could do about it. But yeah, the heartbreaking and shocking truth is the so-called educationists, the teaching colleges or schools of education for one, the state departments of education for 2, and the federal Department of Education for 3, going all the way back to John Dewey and the progressives 100 years ago, do not want the students to learn academic subjects. Mm-hmm. They want most of the kids to get practical skills, like driver's ed, sex ed, hygiene, things like that. Play varsity sports, take vocational classes, whether it's wood shop, metal shop, home ec. They used to push for all the girls, and get practical and vocational skills that way. But only, you IQ test the kids, You find the best and the brightest. They get the full academic program, math, literature, history, science. They're the ones going to college. They're going to be society's future leaders. The rest of us don't need to be able to think like that. We just need to be good at our jobs and obey the wise rulers of the state. And that's their vision. And they're very open about it. I'm not making this up. They say it in so many words. If anybody knows the history of philosophy here, you can see Plato's influence. You have the philosopher king, the philosopher kings and queens, the Hillary Clintons of the world. They'll govern in the legislature and in the classroom, and the rest of us will be good work ants, good at our jobs, and will obey the wise rules of the state. That's the vision. That's what they've implemented in the schools of education, and they've severely dumbed down the academic program. And it's no mystery here why American kids score so poorly on international tests relative to kids from other countries. Because to put it simply, in other countries in Europe and Asia, they teach academic subjects much more widely and deeply than they do in the United States. That's why.
Yeah, some foreign kids I've worked with, they moved over here because their parents have got a job here, raised in a different country, and a lot of times they know English grammar and American history better than a lot of kids who've been raised here.
Michael, that's sad. It's good for the foreign kids. It's heartbreaking to the American kids. It's absolutely true. I got a vivid taste of it 3 years ago when I was teaching, business ethics at the American University in Bulgaria. The Bulgarian kids are good kids, motivated kids, because Bulgaria is a poor country. These were business majors at the American University at AUBG. They saw a business degree from AUBG as the way out of Bulgaria. Work for a multinational corporation. They could live in Paris, London, New York. They were highly motivated. And you are absolutely right. Their command of English writing was substantially better than most of my American college students. Substantially better. And English is a second language. They're not native-born English speakers.
That's another thing. They know at least two languages, whereas most Americans, including myself, just know one. I've taken others, taken German, taken Spanish. I just forgot.
Well, I know two, English and Brooklynese, but
yeah.
Too many of the students don't know any. They have half a language. They know some English, but they don't. They can speak it, but they have a very limited vocabulary and they can't write it.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. Yeah. So
basic cognitive skills. That's the reason we need an education. I think part of the good news is that there's different ways of getting an education, and I've seen it. Having taught adults very often, the adults come into the class, they're 30s or 40s or whatever, and they're more intelligent. They're much more knowledge, that they've accumulated from life experience. And over and over again, the adult students told me, when I got out of high school, I wasn't ready for college. I did the right thing, went to work, got married, have kids. They're mature, and they just have more knowledge from life experience. And working and living like a responsible adult is an education. And I think a lot of their cognitive skills are better, I imagine, than when they were 18, now that they're 20 years later, and they're much more prepared for college level work than the 18, 19, 20-year-old kids.
Yeah, and we want to point out that that's not just necessarily in general. That is, again, evidence that the educational system isn't doing what it should. If it did what it should, then a lot of people wouldn't even need to go to college, and because a lot of it's just remedial. And if you look back in history, a lot of people, these people who'd go to college, they'd go to college when they're 13 or 15 or something, 16.
Yeah. I think we talk about some of the good educators in the United States today, and our good friend Lisa Van Dam, I think, at Van Dam Academy in California is a good example of this.
And LaPorte. I
think for many, LaPorte School, where my buddy Eric Daniels, is the head of school out there. And I think a really good education, graduating from high school, at 17 or 18, you would have a very advanced education. I think if the schools focused on academic subjects like they should and taught them in the right order, as Lisa Van Dam emphasizes, I think a high school degree should give you substantially more knowledge the most American college graduates have, including coming out of elite schools like Princeton, and places like that. I think a high school education should give you a good high school education should give you much more, significantly more, maybe more than even, at least as much as a master's degree in knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to remind folks, like as we talked about, Johns Hopkins in their graduate school one program, some kind of biomedical degree, it might be particular. I don't know how general this is, but you can look up their R3 program. Johns Hopkins is to teach their graduate students how to think critically, to be logical, to do science, because they found that scientists and a lot of graduates didn't know how to do it. And if we think, okay, well, Johns Hopkins, considered one of the best colleges in our country, the way things are, if they have a problem with that, well, what does that say about the undergraduate program in the high schools? It's not like everyone learns it in high school and they forget, and then Johns Hopkins is to retrain them again. It wasn't there in the first place.
Right. Yeah, you reminded me, and you're right, Johns Hopkins is a great school. They're one of the best medical schools in the country, maybe in the world. But you reminded me, Richard Pipes, who was a famous scholar at Harvard for many years. I think he died just recently at a ripe old age. Richard Pipes said, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, that he said the applicants for his freshman seminar at Harvard were woefully ignorant of the world's great literature. This is at Harvard. I mean, they get some of the cream of the crop of high school graduates coming in. He said the freshmen there knew very little about the world's great literature. Mm-hmm. It's really sad. So anyhow, to answer your original question, it's a philosophic point. It's given our rational nature, it needs to be cultivated, just like a bird's ability to fly, or a cat's ability to hunt. But the rational faculty is so complex, it's so sophisticated. It takes many more years of nurturing than, for cats or birds, it's much simpler. But to learn how to learn how to master machinery, or run a store, or be a writer, or whatever it is you're gonna do with your life, requires a great deal of intellectual conceptual development. Mm-hmm. Never mind to invent the machinery. So it's our rational nature. That's the reason why we need such an extensive education, and the sophistication, the complexity of our rational nature.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it takes so much time and effort to work that particular aspect of human nature that we just don't have time to do some of the other things we might do, some other survival skills like some other animals have. It's still there. We're still physical. We're still animals. But this thing is so important and takes such extensive training. We just have to jettison some stuff and focus on essentials and focus on that aspect of us.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because it would be great if we cultivated our other senses, like our hearing and our smell, the way, say, other animals do. And we could do it. Our nose and our ears can work just as efficiently as for a cat, let's say. But for a cat who's going to hunt their prey, they need to be able to hear and smell their prey. For us, that would be good. But for us, it's vastly more important to be able to understand math, to understand, to be able to read, to be able to write coherently. That's much more important for us, especially in the modern world where we've advanced to the point where we are today. But even in a primitive world, maybe even more in a primitive world, come to think of it, because we need to develop. We can't rely on other people. We need to develop spears and and stuff and make weapons so we can hunt animals and defend ourselves from saber-toothed tigers and figure out how those caves must have been drafty, Melanie, in January and December in Minnesota. Those caves must have been drafty. We had to figure out how to make a fire and warm it. That's the other animals can't do it, but we can.
Get the smoke out.
Yeah, we got to do that too. So we don't want to warm ourselves at the cost of choking to death.
Yeah, and then the hearing and smelling and stuff, it's something we can learn more on our own, but the rational faculty requires advanced training. You need an expert. Very few people, if anybody really, can figure out how to do it right on their own. I guess there are some autodidacts, Some people like that, but the vast majority of us, me included, no way in heck could I figure this out on my own. We got to have someone, an expert, training us in this stuff.
Yeah, it's too sophisticated. It's too advanced. So yeah, that's why good teachers are so valuable. To be able to teach these subjects. I mean, you're right. There's a few autodidacts who maybe figure out you can teach themselves to read, and the basics of cognition, and then learn more advanced fields. But it's so much. It makes the subject so much more accessible to have an expert teacher, to lead us through it.
Yeah, and then look at all the effort and thinking it's taken to get us like where we are, and we still have a lot to learn. Like Aristotle learned a lot, but we still had to learn about induction, generalization, how to properly do science. We're still trying to learn that. Think about all the
just look at the climate change issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And then all the centuries and millennia of thinking behind and underlying what Maria Montessori did. Yeah. So you need experts, and it's like hard work. Whereas people thousands of years ago could effectively smell and listen. People nowadays can effectively smell and listen, but not everyone could effectively reason.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. And I know you mentioned the field of logic, a little bit earlier in the show, and what logic does for us. And I've been teaching logic for over 30 years now to college students, and I try and reduce it to or present it in essential terms, especially for these poor kids who come into college unequipped to do college level work. And I just think about it's painful, by the way, before I get to logic. I just want to emote here for a second. It's painful to watch these poor kids. I won't mention any names. Really good American kids, but their minds have been stunted by the exceptionally poor, or the lack of education, the non-education they've received, and then they're thrown into college, and here they are, freshmen, their first semester, and they have to take intro to philosophy or logic. So we're doing, it's a college level class. These kids need remedial work. You can't do remedial. Higher education is not about remedial work. I can't do remedial work. I'm not, trained to do it, and I'm not interested in it. I want, I teach real college level material. And for many of these kids, it's just painful. The abstractions of philosophy are there's such high level abstractions as we're talking about. They come from high schools where they haven't been taught to read in many cases by phonics, so they struggle. They struggle just with the mechanics of reading. Because they struggle with reading, and because the educationists don't want them, gaining knowledge of literature. And anyway, the reading lists have been severely dumbed down. My daughter, who's a great kid and goes to this top, considered a top suburban public high school. You know what their 12th grade English reading list was?
What?
Well, let me tell you a little background here. Because when I was a high school kid, I didn't think, looking back on it, I think the schools were that good back then. But on top of that, I was such a troublemaker in high school. I got kicked out of every.
No way.
Yeah. I was a pain in the ass. I got kicked out of every advanced placement, honor background, honors course you could. And here I am in a 12th grade, just garden variety English course in a public high school in Brooklyn, New York, no honors or anything. And we had a reading list, and I remember two books we read. I remember reading Macbeth, and I remember reading Crime and Punishment. So and we discussed it in class. We wrote papers on it. The teacher worked with us on our writing.
Cool.
These are two of the great writers in history, right? Shakespeare and Dostoevsky. Now, my daughter's 12th grade reading list at a supposedly top suburban public high school there is no reading list. There's no reading in the 12th grade. Zero, zilch, nada, the null set. They just work on their college essays. They don't do any reading. A whole year is wasted as far as teaching these kids the great works of literature. It's a disgrace.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah, so anyway, so these poor kids, come into a college philosophy classes. They know no history. They know little or no literature. They struggle with the mechanics of reading. They can't write a coherent essay. And now they're studying metaphysics. I tell them metaphysics deals with the nature of reality taken as an entirety. And they go, what? I mean, the breadth of the abstractions for these poor kids, and it's painful. It's just painful to watch. And logic's even worse because when you're dealing with formal deduction, and we're going through categorical propositions and categorical syllogisms and the distribution of terms, and if these kids knew any math, it would be much easier. But they don't. And I'm telling you, Mel and Mike, I have a heart. It's painful for me to watch these poor kids. So anyhow, I want the takeaway. Even for these academically very weak students, I want them to realize I come into class every day and I'll say, "What's the purpose of logic?" And that they know that much because I've drummed it into them. It's to teach us how to provide evidence for the truth of a conclusion. Yeah, thank you. So they know that much. That we're not just emoting here. We're not Adam Schiff. We're just gonna we're gonna impeach Trump because we hate him. We actually want evidence. We need factual data. So they have, at least they know that logic is our entree into objectivity. That is, we're not just emoting here. We're not going by our feelings. We actually provide factual data to support the truth of a conclusion. And and I give them a bunch of examples. And I mentioned climate change in this book because I'm fascinated by the issue, and I give them a bunch of evidence. That climate change is natural, it's cyclical, it's ongoing. And I gave them a ton of evidence. Before the modern warm period was the Ice Age. Before that was the medieval warm period. And so on and so on. And all they've had on this was propaganda in the first place. Most of it. But it's I think it's eye-opening. For at least they get that much. Factual evidence is necessary to support a conclusion. That's what distinguishes. I'll ask them, what's the I'll give them an example. I remember once in class, I tell them, it was a SUNY purchase. I can't remember the context anymore. And I always make some controversial point. One of the students sings out, "Well, that's your opinion." And I said to her and to the class, "Well, is everything a matter of opinion?" I said, what distinguishes an opinion or belief on the one hand from truth on the other? And after a lot of discussion, one of the students finally realizes, well, with truth, he said, you got to back it up. I said, good. We back it up with what? He said, facts. I said, exactly.
The sad thing is that took so long.
It did. It did. It took about 5 or 10 minutes of discussion.
If they were in second grade, okay, but these are people in college.
Yeah, and it's a night class too. Some of them are adults.
Wow.
But anyhow, it finally got to that, and I stressed to them, like I do to all my logic students, truth costs extra. I said we have, we all have a right to our opinion, whatever it is. We can sing it from the rooftops. Freedom of speech and freedom of intellectual expression is sacred. But the sheer fact that we have a right to our opinion is insufficient in and of itself to certify it as true. Truth costs extra. We got to back it up with facts. We got to back it up with evidence. And the more sophisticated the field, like climate science is unbelievably complex. The more evidence we need.
Yeah.
At least they got that much. But then we get into the technicalities and the complexities of how we do that. What counts as evidence? What doesn't count as evidence? How much evidence do we need in a given case? The kids struggle with it. It's painful. It is painful.
Yeah, just the whole general idea of theory building is not done at all in schools. Nowhere, zilch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think let me reiterate, because I think what logic does for us is I think it's the entree into an objective method. We're not just going with our feelings here anymore. We're not just emoting. We take our feelings seriously. We don't want to hurt our feelings. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Our feelings, are important to how we experience life. To be happy is an emotion. To be in love is an emotion. To be angry at injustice is an emotion. It's all good. Yeah. But we need evidence to establish the truth of a conclusion. And I may feel something deeply, passionately, sincerely, and mistakenly, right? We need evidence. Like, so we're moving away from just a subjective reliance on our own feelings, and we're moving into the objective ballpark here. We're basing our conclusions on the object, not on the subject, on evidence, on facts.
An example.
The logic is critically important.
Yeah, like people can think, look at the difference between a fair trial and a lynch mob. Lynch mob, pure emotion.
Right. Yeah.
They don't care if they get the right person or not. They just want to kill. Whereas, or some racist stuff that's happened, in different places around the world. But
right here, I mean, at Tuskegee, Booker T. Washington's staff had it was like 3,600 magazine and newspaper articles of blacks who were lynched during the Jim Crow era. They had no evidence. They didn't let him go to trial. They just hated him. They just felt he's black, he's guilty, whatever. They lynched him or burned him or shot him. Yeah. And it's completely subjective. It's a good example that you raised, Michael.
Thanks.
A lynch mob versus a fair trial. It's pure emotion versus evidence.
So it's a serious issue. But then on the other hand, we're not saying...
Yeah, it's a life and death. It's a life and death issue.
Yeah. And then we're not saying, oh, well, therefore, our animal aspect is irrelevant, or don't be emotional. It's just not a matter of that. It's a matter of do emotion right and do thinking right, differentiate between the two, and fully, totally appreciate each one for what they are, nothing more and nothing less.
Right. Yeah, I know. You'll hear somebody say, well, you're too emotional, and I'll point out to them, there's no such thing as too much emotion.
Thank you. Yeah.
There is such a thing as too little reason, but there's no such thing as too much emotion. I mean, emotion is how we experience life, and so emotions are vital. But at times we need to hold it in abeyance because we need evidence to, like you said about the lynch mob. It's a perfect example. Yeah. We can be really angry at somebody, even hate them, but that doesn't mean we're going to hang the guy without evidence. We got to say, hold on, that's the way I feel, but let's take a look at the evidence here.
Yeah, and we got to be like Aristotle. He said when there's an emotion, it's got to be. I forgot. You probably remember more. It's got to be about towards the right person, in the right way, for the right reason, something like that.
That sounds like Aristotle. Very carefully reasoned. Yeah, I don't remember the exact. the exact. Yeah, but that reminds me, because like today, you're raising a good point here, guys. Because today you'll hear stuff like, it's almost like amongst intellectuals, it's often taken for granted. One, they'll say you're an angry person, as if that was self-evidently an immoral thing to be. To be an angry person, and even more so, is we ban hate. We have the war against hate. We have to fight hate. And point out to these people, trying to reason. These are emotions. They're not. They're second. They're not primaries. They're secondary. So, the question is, like with hate, is it? I'll ask them. Is it morally wrong for a humane person to hate Hitler? I mean, or some mass murderer like that. We should hate. It's a very rational response to to these egregious crimes. I mean, the Nazis murdered like 20 million innocent civilians. And similarly with anger. I mean, it depends what you're angry about. I mean, if you're angry at injustice, like you mentioned the lynch mobs in the Jim Crow South. If you're angry about those kinds of injustices, again, that's a very rational response. It depends on who the emotion is directed towards and for what reason.
And it motivates you. That's where emotion comes from in part. It's like a motivation, a drive. It drives you to help correct the injustice.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we need to be clear thinkers on this and make clear to our brothers and sisters that experiencing hate or anger, these are not pleasant emotions, but they're legitimate. They're rationally based sometimes. You don't hate people, over trivialities like their ethnic origin or their race or their nationality or their religion or things like that. But you can properly be angry at and should be angry at serious injustice. You can hate people who are mass murderers. That's very, very rational and appropriate. And I think we need to be clear on this. There's too much talk about these kinds of emotions, which is secondary, and we need to be focused more on the moral principles. What would the person actually do?
Yeah.
And
people can.
And then, really quickly, go ahead.
Oh, okay, Timey. I think people, as they raise their kids, could start that really young. I mean, I did that, and I raised three. I mean, and you really have to show children as they're growing up that yes, if they're upset or they're angry about something, but then back them up a little bit and look at why, so that they understand where those emotions are coming from, and then appeal to their thinking process of how do we solve this now. I mean, really, that can start so young because kids get it. They actually see when you work them through a problem. So to already get through high school and into college, and they're still not sure like how to deal with emotions and where they come from or where to put them if they need to take care of a problem. Did you find that's the case, that they really weren't even able to deal with emotions either? Wasn't so much that they had them, but just they didn't even know where they come from and what to do with them.
The college students?
Yeah, that you're working with.
Yes, sometimes, but the good news is, the kids who are in college tend to be motivated. They want to be there, and so they don't have any real behavioral problems here. It's not like at least in my experience. So those kind of issues with painful emotions or negative emotions, haven't really come up. In my class, the real problem for me is that the kids are just cognitively unprepared. Yeah, but I'll give you an example. I mean, what you're talking about, Melanie, that's just terrifying, is all of these people who feel the need to go shoot up the school, and murder a bunch of innocent people. Now, I don't think it's an accident that so many people shoot up schools. I mean, granted, that's where the kids are during the day, and maybe they make enemies there. But I don't think it's an accident. There's something going on in the schools that enrages a lot of people, and they want to go shoot up the school. They don't want to take the guns and go shoot up McDonald's, or Wendy's. They go shoot up the school. It's funny, and this leads us into the Second Amendment question, which I know is not what we're here to discuss. But as a gun owner and as somebody who supports gun ownership, the only place I feel the need to have a gun is in the schools, which is the one place where I can't bring it, something that the kids' minds are so stunted by what goes on in the schools. I can see why they're enraged and why and they can't deal with the emotion, like you said, Melanie. And so some of these poor kids, I mean, they're murderers. I can't feel sorry for them. But go back to Aristotle, qua victim of the school system that's had this mind twisted and stunted by the school, I could feel for him. Qua murder, I can't. And so, the complexity here, their mind's been stunted. They're angry about it. Can empathize with that. They can't deal with the emotion. The rage dominates, and they go off on a murder spree. Fortunately, I've never had to deal with that. I hope I never do, because I'm not allowed to bring my gun into the schools. And even if I could, the second to last thing I want to do is have to shoot it out, with some mass murderer. The last thing, of course, is I don't want to be a victim of, or have innocent kids a victim of a mass murder.
And then really quickly for folks, when Andy was talking about like Aristotle didn't exactly say these things. The point is to say qua means QUA, in the manner of. So we're looking at things from different perspectives. You could say qua father, he felt sorry for his child and wanted to help him. Qua judge, he had to condemn his child, something like that. So from this perspective, from that perspective, that's kind of what Andy meant, like taking this language and thinking of Aristotle and applying it to a modern situation.
Yeah, that's a good explanation, Michael.
I got that from the dictionary. That one, the father judge. I got that from a dictionary.
Yeah, but you're good.
That's good. You retained and kept it.
You're a good example guy, because those examples are clarifying.
Cool, thank you. I got it from the World Book Dictionary, right there in red, leather bound.
Well, they call the information age for a reason, right? I mean, it's really cool for if anybody really wants education. It's never been easy to get one.
Yeah. And then about the emotion thing, one thing that people in general should learn, it would help, that I think I've only seen this from what I've read and stuff from, the unfortunately demonized by some people Ayn Rand, the idea that behind emotions is values, underlying emotions is values. We cannot have emotions without having a value that we are judging and responding to, but underneath that is like ideas and experiential context, like real things in the world. So I think a lot of people, they're lost in their emotion and they don't know, where do I go with this? What the hell's going on? I got this feeling.
Yeah.
But if we taught them more scientifically and logically how to analyze what's going on, it doesn't get rid of the emotion. It doesn't get rid of the value. It just gives us a perspective on it. We're still emotional. It's still there. It's not dissolved in acid. We just look and see what's the value underlying this emotion that I still have. Or okay, do I keep it? Do I change it? Is it a bad value? What ideas underlie that? So we got causation going here. They're learning a little science. They're learning how to deal with things and change what they need and what they don't. And they're learning how their ideas relate, how everything is interacting here. Value, idea, experience, emotion. I think that would help a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're making me think as
Sorry. I was kidding.
Yeah. You don't want to make the philosopher think. So the philosopher should do any thinking, right? But I was just thinking, as you were talking, because we go back to these poor, frustrated kids in the schools. If by analogy, if we won't try this at home because it's cruel, but if we were gonna, cripple a bird's wings or, rip out a cat's claws or something so the bird couldn't fly or the cat couldn't hunt or anything, they'd be enormously frustrated. And because they couldn't live very long, but the frustration would and animals could feel emotions. We know that there would have to be some level of frustration and anger and rage and fear, because they were crippled. Their survival instruments were crippled, and at some emotional level, they would sense their survival was in peril. And I think with these poor kids, these who grow up not just to be mass murderers, but just to be angry people who look. I'm guessing here, for every enraged mass murderer, there's probably dozens, maybe hundreds of people who are enraged who don't perpetrate mass murder. Mm-hmm. And I know I was a really angry kid. I told you just before, so I was a troublemaker, and I was kicked out every honors class that the school offered. And a lot of that, goes on at home, of course, but still. The schools contribute to the frustration and the rage because we need to develop our rational faculty. It's our nature. It's our survival instrument. And just like the bird needs to develop their wings and fly. And when the schools cripple that, when they don't teach the kids phonics, when they don't let the kids use phonics, they won't let them sound out the words. The kids struggle just to read. Reading is, to me, when you teach phonics and you teach the kids to sound out the words, it's as intellectually as natural for human beings as riding a bike or swimming is at the physical level. It's not hard to learn. In a matter of months, a motivated kid can learn how to read. You cripple the kid's ability to read. You don't teach them grammar. They don't know how to write. You teach them very little math. The kids' minds are stunted. It's no wonder that so many of these kids are frustrated and angry. I'd be frustrated and angry too if they can't think effectively enough to realize what's being done to them in many cases. But I think they feel it. I think they feel it at some emotional level. They feel that the schools have done them egregiously wrong, and I don't think it's an accident. Prior to the early 19th century, roughly World War I, the American schools used phonics to teach reading. American education was very good. A lot of these guys lived out on the prairies. They all had guns. I haven't heard. There probably was some cases of it, but I think my guess was pretty rare that anybody took their guns and went into the school and shot it up. Whereas today, it's like every year. It has sometimes, multiple times. It's got to be related here. Again, a lot of this comes from home, but the schools are contributing to this kind of rage-filled, violence, by stunting the kids' minds, stunting their survival instrument, and filling them with frustration, rage, and fear. It's got to be. And again, I think a clue is they don't just go shoot up places indiscriminately. Once in a while, somebody just goes into McDonald's or a movie theater, but it's like over and over and over again. It's the schools, and I don't think that's an accident. They don't understand it, but at some level of feeling, they know who has damaged them. They know who has hurt them. They know who has really harmed them.
Yeah, and I think if you go back like 5,000 or 10,000 years ago, people didn't really learn to, a lot of them think as much, but then you still maintain that curiosity. They could still be curious. They were trying to find things out. They knew there were things they didn't know, maybe about thinking. But now it's like the conceptual faculty is specifically stunted. You got people, as we talked about, going to Johns Hopkins and Harvard who can't think. And Rice University in the engineering department has to have an engineering leadership program to teach their undergrads about entrepreneurship and communication skills and like some thinking skills and things like that too. But it's like actually stunted, so they know something is going on. They trust these people to do something. They know at some level it's just, as you say, a feeling that it's wrong. But because they're not a genius, they don't know how to do things right. I mean,
yeah, and they're not equipped to deal with the rage. It's heartbreaking at many different levels. One, at these kids have been victimized, and then two, they become the victimizers and kill innocent people in their rage.
I'm sorry if this seems kind of negative, folks. Remember, we got to think about how are we going to take this and turn it into logical reason, passionate love. It's like, this is just because we love something so much, how can we make it positive and right? It's not, we're just relishing in the negativity and this is, I just feel so good. It's like, we don't like talking about entirely
it's horrible.
Yeah.
Let's turn to, it's your show. I'm only, I'm only a hired gun here, but maybe I should have used that. I'm just a guest here. If you want to like go into the positives about what we can do to fix it, you're right. That's
what you want to throw
even more important.
What's that, Mel? Yeah, we're talking about. I think it's relevant, so really drive home the point that this matters. It has effects. It's not irrelevant, like the lynch mob thing we said versus a fair trial, civilized fair trial. But to go back to some of this point more, and maybe we'll see if we can flesh this out a little more if we got more to say, or else say more about logic. But
Michael, let me interrupt you for a second. Over and over and over again, we come back to one point. I think that everybody could do with their kids, and that is use phonics to teach the kids how to read. Your phonics works. There's only 26 letters and 40 something sounds, and I forget 70 or 80 combinations of sounds in the English language. In contrast to the whole word method, where the kids supposed to learn how to memorize the shape of the words, and there's like thousands and thousands of them, and it's impossible to do. With phonics, it's a very limited number of sounds that you have to connect with the words you already know verbally. You connect the literary symbols with the words. It's very easy to teach reading, and once you do that, parents could do it. It's certainly the schools can do it very easily. And once you do that, you open up the whole world of books to the kids. And then the kids can learn. They can read. And their level of their frustration level will be much lower. I remember when my daughter was little, we were at the park, and she's 3, let's say, and she see the bigger kids, 5, 6, 7, 8. They were able to walk up the sliding pond, not just slide down. They could walk up to the top. So she wanted to do it too, but her leg muscles just weren't sufficiently developed. She couldn't do it yet, and she worked at that every time we were at the park, and it was a lot. Within a year or so, she'd get to the top, and I remember how proud she was. She gets to the top and she said, I did it. I said, Freddie, that's good. It's a sense of accomplishment. There's a sense of pride, and to learn to develop the mind is so much more important to us than the body. There's a sense of accomplishment there, and that frustration is alleviated. The anger and the rage is alleviated because you have this sense of your own value, your own worth, your own competence. And it's so important that the reading ability and the sense of pride that comes with it, and open up the whole world of books. And it's so easy. Parents could do it with their kids. The schools could do it very easily. I mean, we have to change their whole philosophy, but in Aristotle's terms, potentially, we could teach kids to read at age 4, maybe younger, certainly by age 4, in a matter of weeks, and open up the whole world of books to the kids.
And a good example of what you're saying is getting rid of that rage and turning it into positives. It's not like there isn't any examples. There's examples around the country. Like, what did Jaime Escalante do? If you haven't seen the movie Stand and Deliver, watch the movie. A real character. He got there was like the school run by gangs. Gangs were there. They didn't hide themselves. There was like criminal activity going on. Jaime Escalante came in. Him, a principal, maybe like 3 people mainly were the ones that I think really turned around the school.
Yeah, you're right. Stand and Deliver is a great movie, and I recommend it to everybody. Yeah. And it shows what one great teacher can do. He turned around the lives of dozens, maybe hundreds, maybe more, of high school kids.
Yeah.
Before we leave this, go ahead, Andy. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's just reading's fundamental to everything. That's what was so great about Marva Collins. Who left the Chicago public school system, started West Side Prep, and she used phonics where the public schools had just rejected it. She used phonics, introduced reading into every aspect of the syllabus. And in math class, they were reading from the textbook and reading word problems and stuff. She had them reading, using phonics. And that's the foundation of all thinking, to be able to read. And you open up the whole world of books to the kids. You open up their mind. And I think you go a long way towards alleviating the kind of rage and frustration that so many of these kids feel, because their mind, just like a bird who can fly or a cat who can hunt, there's a sense of efficacy, there's a sense of their own competence.
True.
And now that the kid can read, the kid can think. He's got basic cognitive skills. His whole emotional life, I think, is good. He's going to be more confident and less, feeling like a victim that's got to lash out at the people who so severely, harmed him.
Yeah, they can think, so they want to live and enjoy and grow, and then help their friends and make it a better world for themselves and make themselves better. And
they can get an education, they can have a career, they can hook up with other people, like-minded people as friends, romantic relationship. They can have a life, human life. They can have a human life.
Yeah. And one thing I found, the importance of language there, I find in teaching physics and chemistry and math, that's actually a big hang-up in people being unable to do word problems. That's what I find. It's essentially a problem in not being able to parse a sentence. That's people think, I'm great at English, but I'm bad at math. Well, why can't you do word problems if you're great at English? If you're really good at English, you know the grammar. And I find a lot of times, that's exactly what it is. Like, something is 5 less than something else. Parse the sentence, subject, verb, stuff like that. It's exactly grammar and being able to see what's being said.
Right. Absolutely. Again, a lot of people think grammar is primarily for communication. It's not. It's secondarily important for communication, but fundamentally it's about thinking, about being able to put nouns and verbs together and being able to relate, objects to the actions that they perform and the qualities that they possess. Mm-hmm. Grammar is for clear thinking, and a big part of the reason why the college kids struggle so much in logic is because they've never been taught grammar. Yeah. A basic grounding in grammar would give them basic cognitive skills, basic thinking skills that would help them in logic. They need more than that, but that's one step forward.
Yeah, I wish more people would do that. Even adults, and other adults that need to study grammar, but because of our culture, they denigrate it, don't think it's important, stuff like that. But it would help them think better, live their lives better, communicate with others better, work better if they'd actually do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andy, you said earlier that parents can play a role in helping their kids get started on reading. And absolutely. I think a lot of parents don't really think that way. I think they feel like that's the school's job, or I'm not a teacher. I don't have a degree, that type of thing. But just to maybe give them a little bit of a tip or an idea, when the kids, I homeschooled our three, as you know.
And you did a really good job, too.
Yeah.
Queen Melanie.
Thank you. But it started when they were just, able to sit up in the bathtub. I got those little styrofoam alphabet letters and set them, stuck them up on the side with, once they get wet, they stick on the tub. And we just start saying the sounds. We never really identified the name. Like, I never called it A, B, C. I called it A, B, and K. So if a parent knows just that, they can start putting these sounds in front of their kids with the shape, and before you know it, they're putting the sounds together and reading. That's really how it gets going, which you said phonics, right? But that was when they were super little, and it's amazing what those little guys what they know. If you just show them a few times, they really start getting the idea. And to that, I have to tell you, Jack was in the high chair, and he was sitting in the kitchen at the time, and the sun was shining just right and reflecting off of some kind of metal in the kitchen. But it was shining on the far wall, and it made an I and a T. And he pointed, and he went, it.
Huh. Cool.
I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was like just one of my proudest moments.
And that's that's an original one. You had never done that with him before, and it was the first time, or what?
The word it, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, we just done all the letters all the time, but I never saw him point out something. And he was in the high chair, and he wasn't super talkative yet, or really that far along. But he just pointed at the wall, and he said, "It," and I was just like, "Wow!" So I mean, it's just something a parent can get so much joy out of too by working with their kids.
And today, Hooked on Phonics has so many tools that the parents can buy.
Yeah.
That make the learning of phonics by the kids fun. But I hear you, Melanie, and here's something else that related to that is that motivation. So I mean, when my daughter Penny was a little girl, Borders was still in existence back then. We and we go out for a day to play, and we go to the park and we play, and then stuff. And part of playing was always go to the bookstore. And we go to the kids section, and Penny was always the most discerning shopper. I mean, whether it was a Toys R Us, I mean, I've seen her take 2 hours when she was little to pick out a toy. And that was unusual. Usually it's at least an hour. And it was the same at the bookstore. And I couldn't pick out the book for her, or her mom couldn't pick it. She had to pick it out. So okay, I learned that. After an hour or so, she picked out a book. And it's usually some goofy thing about dogs that could fly, and stuff like that. But the point is, you got to let the kid pick out the book, and it's a subject that the kid's interested in. And then she would sit down. She's 2 years old. I remember her sitting down once, and maybe she was a year and a half, because I remember she was still in diapers. And she sat on the floor. She patted the floor next to her. And she said, "Sit down and read to me, Daddy." So I read about the flying dogs, and stuff, or the kitten who thought the full moon was a bowl of milk and was trying to leap, and things like that. But she liked it, and so the key thing was the young child learns that reading is fun, that there's stuff in books that's cool, there's stuff in books that she's going to like, or he's going to like, just like riding a bike or playing on the swings in the park. That reading's fun, and once the kid learns that reading's fun and there's stuff in there in the books that's cool and interesting, then he or she's going to want to do it on his own, not need mom or dad to read. And by age 4, the motivated kid can learn to read using phonics in a matter of weeks. And so it's and Hooked on Phonics makes it even easier. And you've opened up the whole world of books, the whole world of cognition is now open to the child. And you're right, what you said before, Melanie. Too many parents who are conscientious, they work hard, they got productive jobs, they're honest, they take good care of their kids, they make sure they're well fed, they're well taken care of, medically, they're well clothed in the cold weather and everything. But they make the mistake of thinking, I'm dropping the kids off at school, the school will teach them. And the schools, there are some schools better than others, but for the most part, the schools are not going to teach them. And that's the bad news. The good news is teaching them, basic reading, writing, arithmetic skills. Not that hard. And mom and dad could do it on, even on the weekends. When the kid's motivated because you've taught them the books are fun, yeah, you can teach them phonics. So okay, so only do it 1 or 2 days a week, so it'll take months rather than weeks. But the kid can still learn to read at age 4.
Yeah.
And one thing for folks, everybody, this isn't just parents wanting to help their kids. I recommend to everybody a lecture series from the great courses. Some of them aren't so great, but some of them are pretty good. This one I listened to called Building a Better Vocabulary is very good, and it talks about how to learn words and how things are conceptually related. It's maybe about the best you can do without having a good theory of concept formation, backing it up in induction and logic. But he goes over how to get a word, find out how it's related to other things, get examples, things like that. A lot of good strategies for learning words and seeing how they're conceptually related, like philosophy, philologist, things like that, looking at roots and suffixes. I wish I could remember one right now, like on the spur of the moment, having to keep going and talking. I don't know how well I can think about the word, but there's some that...
well, you can look it up on Dr. Google.
Yeah, but he talks about, like, for example, some people say, well, it sounds like this, so we should spell it as the way it sounds. But this, the guy who has these lectures points out that it's very important to keep the spelling because that maintains the cognitive, conceptual relationships between different words. That, they'd otherwise be lost if we spelled it based like an F instead of a PH, some things like that. So, and if you want to know which words and some of the words, then listen to the lectures. On Audible, you get a membership. It's only $10.95. I think it used to be great courses. I looked it up. This thing, some of these were originally like you buy the CDs, $160, but now with Audible, I think maybe $40.95 if you want it, but you get a subscription, $10.95, $11.95, and it's worth it.
No, I hear you, but I want to keep harping on the importance of teaching the kids to read and the ease with which it can be done, because this is really good news. And I can use my, Melanie did a great job homeschooling her kids, but Melanie's rational and sane and everything. So I want you to take an example of somebody who's neither rational nor sane. That was my mother, who was, as she talk about it. I mean, not even a neurotic Jewish mother. She was just crazy. I realize the poor girl was just crazy. Nevertheless, yeah, and she was. I won't even tell you how. Just let's say she was severely agoraphobic, afraid to leave the house, cowering in the house because it was a terrifying world. She was really. They used to say back in Brooklyn when I was a kid, she was mental, But even so, my two oldest sisters and I, she made the flashcards. They were in vogue back then. I don't know if people may not know what flashcards anymore, but you take like index cards, and you put the letters of all the letters of the alphabet on, and you flash them. You put them in front of the child, and you get the child to sound out the word, to learn the letters, of the alphabet, to learn how to sound them out. She taught us the multiplication table. This is when we were like 4 years old. Before we went to kindergarten, never mind first grade. She taught us the multiplication table. She taught us the alphabet. She taught us how to spell a lot of simple words. And so learning to read once we knew the alphabet, that well was very easy. And this was done by a person who was deeply disturbed. But people are often mixed cases, right? And you could be deeply disturbed and still love your kids, and put, be very crazy in one arena of life, but much more sane and rational in other areas. And so this was done by somebody who was psychologically severely flawed, we put it that way, but troubled. But it's doable. It's not that hard for parents, to do that. Even like I said, parents are working all week. They're conscientious, productive, honest, hardworking people. There's still the weekend. So if you only do it 1 or 2 days a week rather than 5, so it takes months for the kids to learn the alphabet and to learn how to sound out, basic, rather than weak. But you're giving the kid a real head start in their education.
The kids see their parents as being knowledgeable and helpful and like that they have value, that the kids have a value to them, that they're worth them sitting down and doing this with. I mean, it's no doubt in our minds as parents, you and Andy, you and I, that we love our children and stuff, but the kids still need to know that. And what an amazing way to show them by teaching them something that they can use for the rest of their life. I mean, it's just such a
that's good point, Melanie. And also the intellectual, emotional development of that self-esteem, that sense of competence that I could do this. Like Penny was so proud when she got to the top of the sleigh run. But it's when you first learn how to ride a bike, you take the training wheels off, and the kid's proud as well. He or she should be. But it's much more important for them to learn to read, and to learn the multiplication table and to learn basic arithmetic. And there's a real sense of pride and competence that obviates that, a lot of that frustration and rage that so many of these victimized kids in the schools feel. So, some subset of whom go on to shoot up the school, as we discussed before. Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost 9 o'clock on the East Coast. Wow. Speaking of Penny, I wanted to call her, but
okay. Well, we scratched the surface a little more tonight, so.
And we could do more episodes. I'm always happy to come on the illustrious Mel and Mike show.
And one thing to throw in to get in this episode, if it's okay. Another thing, it's very important for people to see reasons of tool of survival, and to draw that out a little bit. It comes up everywhere in all aspects of our life, wherever we're conceptually consciousness, wherever we turn our eyes and ears, our mind is directed. The eyes and ears should be feeding into the mind, the conceptual faculty, so we can make sense of it, see what cause-effect relationships there are, what is really there and what is not, see that the earth goes around the sun doesn't go around the earth, see that someone's guilty, not someone else. So that's important. But then one aspect, so that's important that, like, no matter what you do, parent, professional parent, engineering, drive a bus, work in a store, be a philosopher, everyone has a mind and has to use their rational faculty to do it. And as Aristotle is the only one I am aware of who originally pointed this out, the evidence of the senses is a fundamental principle for all rational thought. Since we all have access to the evidence of the senses, then we're all self-sovereign and rational insofar as our neurology works. And the fact that we're rational animals is supposed to other animals have senses, but that doesn't mean they're rational. They can engage in very complex thought, but it's not conceptual as it is for the human. But it's there for everyone. That's why we need to recognize him, because he's the one that gave rise to the basics we need for freedom and self-sovereignty. But
I agree. I do think that more than any single individual in history, Aristotle taught mankind how to think, because it's not just that he developed laws of logic and identified the basic errors of reasoning, the fallacies of reasoning. That's part of it. But Aristotle identified that what we think about is, like you said, Michael, is observable fact. Reason is not, here's an example I often use in class, whether it's faith-based beliefs or mythology. Now, Aristotle didn't know Christianity, obviously, come centuries later. May have heard about Judaism from, Alexander conquered that part of the world, but the bizarre beliefs, that you'd start with this the spirit who has no bodily means, no brain, no nervous system, no sense organs. I like to think of it as, God as the super ghost of the universe, and then create the universe from nothing. So these are faith-based beliefs. Aristotle may or may not have known about that, but he knew Greek mythology. Right? So my favorite myth, of course, is Athena, who I love as a goddess. Your springs fully developed from Zeus's head. Sounds painful, but but there's a certain logic here.
Beyond a virgin's birth.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
The next level or two.
Right. Yeah. Right. So she doesn't have a mother. She has a father. He's philandering with all these different females, goddesses and humans. But he's got to share all these other kids with the mother. But Athena's his. He doesn't have to share her with her mother. She doesn't have a mother. So he dotes on her, and it makes sense that she's his favorite, and it makes sense that she's loyal to him because she has one parent who adores her. So you see, it's all very logical from the basic premise. That he would then he trusts her. Only Athena is the only one that he'll let hold the thunderbolt. What he's the most powerful weapon in the universe. So all that's very logical, but the basic premise from which it all flows is a bizarre myth. So, that she springs fully developed from her father's head. Aristotle, the biologist, knows that didn't happen. And so, this is not reasoning. The non-contradictory logic is there. She has one parent. He doesn't have to share her, so he dotes on her. So they adore each other. She's the only one he trusts. Well, that's very logical from the basic premise. But the basic premise is bizarre. And Aristotle points out that's not reasoning. Reasoning is yes, in part it's non-contradictory thinking, but it's non-contradictory thinking about observable fact, not about myths, not about faith-based beliefs, but about observable fact. And when you wed non-contradictory logical thinking with observable fact, there's why I think Aristotle taught more than any other single person taught mankind how to think. That's his greatest contribution. I think is right there.
And in a lecture series I listened to, again, part of the great courses, I think, called The Great Ideas of Philosophy, I think edition 2 or something, by Daniel Robinson. He said in there, if someone from outer space had looked at mankind and seen the misery, how they were mistaken, their ignorance, their blindness, their wars, if they were going to do one thing to save humanity and to help him, they would send him Aristotle. It was great. Literally, I got the quote somewhere, but that's what Robinson said.
You never see that. Never that connection made from in much writing out there.
That's brilliant. That's true.
Yeah, and one thing, folks, too, is like another importance of training reason is the fact that it's volitional. Smell, we have automatically. All animals do. Vision, some things like that. Thinking on a certain level. But reason is volitional, and it doesn't happen automatically. So we need to be trained to do it because there's a complexity, the volitional aspect of it, the fact that it's very difficult to do it right. We got to learn the rules of how to reason properly and how to be conscious and how to be aware of reality properly, and that's what logic really is. I think there's a misconception about logic we can talk about some other time because it's getting late, what logic really is, but there we're getting more into the essence and nature of logic, and I think a lot of people don't get that that's what it is. They think more like Spock, or you got these rules, and it's like, I've even heard, like, this guy De Bono is supposed to be someone who studies creativity, and he says there's logic, which is linear thinking, and then there's lateral thinking. Well, it sounds like he's never heard of the logic of analogy or integration or induction and some things like that. So I think De Bono is going on what he thinks logic is based on false ideas in Plato and not really seeing what logic really is, because lateral thinking is part of logic as far as I'm concerned.
No, it's
not
a metaphor.
Exclusive, yeah. Huh.
Yeah, metaphorical too.
It's a metaphor. I'm not quite sure what it literally means to think laterally.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But anyway, I know what it means to think, and I love that quote. Aristotle's the one more than anybody who taught us how to do it. But
yeah,
the college kids aren't ready for Aristotle. Most of them, they're not ready for Aristotle yet. Few of them really get it when we discuss Aristotle in class and appreciate it. Most of them aren't ready. We're talking about whether it's biology or metaphysics or logic or the Nicomachean ethics. We're talking about very sophisticated and advanced intellectual material. The kids should be ready when they're college, but most of them aren't. So we need to fix that. And I think the good news is, I got to sign off, but I think the good news is the 3 R's, the basic cognitive skills are very easy for a motivated child to learn. Parents can do it themselves, and the schools certainly can and should do it. But to get them to do, we have to change the teachers' colleges and the schools of education. Mm-hmm. They have to want the kids to learn academic subjects, which they currently do not.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. All right.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Any last words, Melanie or Andy?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank
and
you.
Hope you'll be on the Mel and Mike show again. When you get a chance, send me the link so I'll put it up on my website.
Awesome.
Sure.
Thank you. Will do. All right.
Which, by the way, everybody out there is AndrewBernstein.net.
Cool.
Great.
Yeah, we'll list it. All right. Awesome. So hope you enjoyed it, folks. Hope you learned a lot about where education comes from and why all this is important. So we'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Have a good night, everybody.